And punctuality being what it is, especially with this guy, because, he's got the real world hanging out with him. Bart Keeler. And right on at 9:30. Punctual, you're right there, man. You're right there.
I try.
Well, see, now there's the running gag here, and it has been here forever, commonly referred to as Nelson Standard Time, where basically it's like, when John says he'll be somewhere at some point, it basically means you add 10 minutes. And so perpetually tardy me is on not on I might have been on Nelson Standard Time this morning, considering I came on at 9:06 and I was slow on the draw this morning. But
hey, I think that's pretty good for you then.
It is, absolutely. Reason we have you here on a Thursday, I guess my first question is, how late did you stay up last night?
I got to bed at like 1:30.
Okay, so you actually did watch the match in its entirety.
Yeah, I did. I was at Fido. We had several shots. The 3-minute period where, what was it, 3 minutes and 50 seconds that we scored all three of those goals.
Mm-hmm.
It was an adventure, to say the least, but we had a lot of fun. A small crowd, but a good crowd last night. And we definitely witnessed some U.S. soccer happenings.
Yes, there was soccer last night, and the U.S. was a part of it.
Yep.
It was, I mean, legitimately, and I ask this in all seriousness, what can you take away from a bagel when the first set was 6-0 and you're waiting for the second set to come around? What can you take away from a match like this? How does this benefit you as a club going forward? I'll save my St. Kitts and Nevis question for a bit, but what do you get out of a match like this where you flip a switch, it's 3 goals in 4 minutes, and then, it's kind of cruising, it's 4-0 at the break, and then you figure you just kind of make your way through the second half and hope nobody gets hurt?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and I think it's the question that can we take like several steps back?
Absolutely.
And, when we talk about, why isn't the A team at this tournament? Do you think Christian Pulisic gets anything from playing in that game last night? No more than, Jesus Ferreira, who we'll talk about him, I'm sure, in a little bit. But, it's one of those matches where, congratulations, you did what was expected. I actually think that, it obviously could have been worse than 6-0. Give a lot of props to that keeper from St. Kitts and Nevis, who, to be honest, he looked pretty decent last night. Like, if I were in a USL Championship team, I'm possibly giving him a call.
Yeah.
He was pretty decent. Their defenders, especially at the end, were just like, and really throughout the game, were literally sacrificing their bodies to not let us score. We got the job done. And I think if more than just like, we won at a scoreline that we probably needed to. Jamaica getting that 4-1 win over Trinidad looked a little scary before our match started. But I think we did a good enough job to say, okay, we're fine. What else do you take away? Again, I think in these games you can take away more from a bad performance than you can a good performance. But I do think that there were individual players who showed that they were definitely at a class above what we were playing last night, and I think that's a positive.
David, and we'll get into the player numbers as we always do as a reference point. David comes in and he says, for however good Cowlins and Dejas were in the prior friendly window where they looked like the most dangerous players for the U.S., they were both meh to miserable last night.
Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. I thought Cowlins and Dejas were not as influential on the game as I think we wanted them to be. I think that's partially, not to defend them too much, but, it's fair to say that they would have done better against a slightly better team that wasn't solely focused on blocking every shot you took, because, they both got into the box a lot, and that's a positive. Zendejas got several crosses off. He got a lot of shots off. Cowell wasn't really able to beat his defender too much, which is a little bit of a problem. But, I think you can look at those as not great performances for sure. But at the same time, you can't put too much into that because it was very clear that St. Kitts was focused on not letting our wingers do too much. Our wingers, our overlapping fullbacks, got a lot of happiness in that game, but our wingers weren't super effective, and that may have just been St. Kitts trying to defend them. It was also very clear that they were, because you could see our on multiple goals, Jesus Ferreira, as that center striker, was unoccupied. So it did seem like St. Kitts was setting up to block our wingers from being super effective, which makes sense. That's where the U.S. has done very good work over the past 4 or 5 years now.
All right, so let's get into the numbers, and I have posted for public consumption. It is Jelani Archibald, the Kittian keeper, and so apparently he's playing.
Is that the word?
Yeah, that's I guess so. That's when I was doing my research. St. Kitts, you are Kittitian apparently. So he's playing in Malta for Berkir Kara. So that's your
tribute. I mean that sincerely. I think he could make a good case for himself in USL as a good shot stopper, and would hopefully, it probably wouldn't cost you too much. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so the numbers for the U.S. players last night. Like I said, we'll start from the back. Once again, when you're not really challenged, Sean Johnson. The rankings this time coming from Mike Woitala at Soccer America as our baseline here. Sean Johnson basically got a 5. You were there. That's what I'm thinking.
I think a lot of people were rightly disgruntled that Gaga Slonina didn't play in this game.
Yeah.
I would also ask, what would Gaga have gotten from this game?
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thing.
But I think there's value in the fact that he could have just played. I truly believe that, but yeah. Continue. Sorry, I just needed to make that point.
Defenders. DeJuan Jones got a 5. Matt Miazga got a 6. Jalen Neal got a 5. Brian Reynolds got a 7.
I thought Brian Reynolds was very good last night. Very good. Obviously, his goal is going to pump up his numbers, which, by the way, an absolute banger of a goal, man. That was so impressive. I thought he was very good otherwise. Again, it was very clear that St. Kitts was focusing on Zendejas a lot during our attack, and that allowed Reynolds to make some great overlapping runs, and he did. And I thought he was I thought, for me, if you wanted to pick one standout for the game, Reynolds was that guy.
Midfield. Busio 7, James Sands a 6, Georgi Mihailovic an 8.
That's a little. Well, I guess Sands didn't have a whole lot to do. We'll just put it that way. Yeah. I thought he was pretty good last night, actually. Busio and Mihailovic had great games. Again, what do you take from this particular opponent? I do take that Mihailovic was one of those guys, to me, that showed he's a class above where he was playing last night. And he needs to start doing that. We've wanted Georgie to kind of inject himself into that national team conversation. I think there's still spots to claim as backup attacking midfield spots on the senior team roster, and I think he did himself some favors today. But again, we're talking at St. Kitts and Nevis. So
forwards, before we get into the subs, Zendejas a 4. Jesus Ferreira, for obvious reasons, punches an 8 for Mike Woitala. Cade Cowell got a 2. And here's what Woitala says. Cade Cowell started the day by failing to control a pass that met him in the penalty area, and it never got better. When he shrugged off a tackle by Keith Roy Freeman in the 16th minute, he shot straight at the keeper. His later attempts to dribble through failed, as did a close-range volley with no pressure, one of his 5 unsuccessful shots. So Woitala gave him a 2.
I think it's fair. I think it's, well, let me rephrase. I think it's harsh to give him a 2, but I think the reasons are fair, right? He didn't look great. He failed to really beat anyone on the dribble, which is what he's good at. His shots, I mean, we've seen him in MLS. He's able to get a quick shot off, and he wasn't able to do that at all last night. I think last night was a game that you would have expected him to score, and he didn't.
Subs. Alan Senora a 3. Aiden Morris a 5. Brandon Vasquez a 3.
Yeah.
Missed a header from 6. Christian Roldan a 6. and the new Papa got a 5 in his substitution. Your trivia on the day, Jesus Ferreira with his second U.S. hat trick set a record by hitting the 10-goal mark in 20 appearances, besting Clint Mathis, who got 10 goals of his 12 in his first 23 games.
So let's table the Jesus Ferreira discussion for a second.
Sure.
I thought all the subs were okay.
Mm-hmm.
Senora has been very disappointing in his appearances for the U.S. I think both Senora and Zendejas have not lived up to the hype that they received, especially Senora, and it's disappointing. Gressel, congrats on the child. I don't have anything to say about this game, man. Sorry. Congrats on birthing a second baby into this world. You and your wife, mazel tov to both of you. Let's see. Morris was, I don't want to say he was invisible, but at that point in the game, it was like, what? And actually, when he came on toward the end of the game, St. Kitts started actually creating things. So, I don't know whose fault that is necessarily, but I mean, it was, by the time most of these subs came in, the game was done and dusted. I do want to point out Brandon Vasquez, man, again, it's a game where you would have expected him to score. It's a game where you would have expected him to do well, and he missed the goal, missed that header, and didn't really do a whole lot outside of that. So very disappointing. But again, at that point and that stage in the game, I don't know what you take from it.
All right. So are we bringing Jesus Ferreira back off the table?
Yeah, let's have this conversation, John.
Go for it.
Because yes, congratulations to Jesus Ferreira for getting his 10th goal. I think he now has 11 goals for the U.S. That's a very a positive thing. However, his goals have come in bunches against not good teams, earning him the Twitter nickname, the Pirate of the Caribbean. 2 goals in that 7-0 friendly versus Trinidad, and I think that was a December friendly even. A goal against Panama in the 2021 home qualifier, 4 goals against Grenada at home in that Nations League match, and the goal against Mexico this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's his best opponent that he scored against. 2 goals against St. Kitts. So yes, he has scored a lot of goals in a very short amount of time for the U.S. I think that is a positive. That's a good thing if you're a U.S. fan. It has to be said, the level of competition has not been very good at all. He has not scored in a road match.
Mm-hmm.
And when you compare him to Clint Mathis, from the research that I was able to do this morning while waking up in bed,
there you go.
Mathis has scored 3 goals on the road.
Mm-hmm.
He has scored 2 goals in World Cup qualifying. Also, his 10th goal that he scored was a goal against Korea in the World Cup. So the level of difficulty is much higher. He scored against Brazil. He scored against Germany. He scored at Honduras. It has to just be said, right? And Jesus, again, he scored a lot of goals, but he also has scored those goals in bunches in fewer games. So it's hard for me to say, oh, well, he scores a goal a game, because when you look at Clint Mathis, for example, his first goals, right? He scores 10 goals in his first 23 caps. He scored them through 8 games, whereas Ferreira has only done that in 5 games. So he's only scored in 5 games for the U.S.
Okay.
So again, these numbers, if you look at the just fact of he has scored 11 goals in 20 games or whatever it is now, that is a very, in theory, a good clip. But when you get into the numbers, both who they're against and how many games he's actually scored in, it's not a good it's not good for Jesus, and it kind of shows that he has a ceiling. Could he raise that ceiling? I think he could. I still think he's a very talented player, but it's just, you haven't done anything outside of scoring against Caribbean opponents at home, and a Panama team that at that point in time was dead in the water, and a Mexico and a cash grab friendly. So, I mean, it just, I hate to detract, but it just is not as impressive as I think that stat has been, praised to be.
So then what do? I mean, the question is out there that you pose for Jesus Ferreira. Question is also in the Twitch pitch from Coco about Senora continuing to get called up after this tournament.
I mean, we'll see how he finishes the tournament, right? I don't think Ferreira has done anything to hurt his stock. I think that's the thing, right? Like, he's going to continue to get looked. But you also look at a Ricardo Pepi, who has 7 goals in fewer matches for Ferreira, and he scored on the road twice. He scored in a Nations League final. In fact, Jordan Morris, even, who has similar numbers to Ferreira, has scored multiple goals on the road in CONCACAF in official competitions. So for Ferreira, again, I don't know where he is on the depth chart, and obviously we know that Greg Berhalter loves him some Jesus Ferreira to the point where he started him in a must-win game in the World Cup, in the World Cup.
Yeah.
Despite that being a very bad, like, that was probably one of the decisions that if I were hiring or firing Greg Berhalter, I wouldn't have kept him on for that. But Ferreira deserves to keep being around if he's going to keep scoring in these matches for these matches. Senora, though, I agree. I want to see how he finishes this tournament. It's possible that, like, he kind of gets into a groove, and I thought toward the end of the match he was doing a little better, but he has not been impressive in any of the matches, and he's had some of those, like, Camp Cupcake matches earlier this year too that he was at best fine, and that's not the type of player we need to raise our level, especially when you have a guy like Georgi Mihailovic who provides assists and scores goals in a game like this.
All right, so then let's play. Let's. This is going to be obviously the game of the day. Oh, by the way, what's the mug? Ah, yes. Okay, understood.
This mug cost me $100 million.
No doubt. Welcome, Declan Rice.
My neighbor down the street bid a lot of money for it, and then just told me, actually, I don't want it anyway.
There you go. All right. So since I'm going to be doing this game with Kaylor Hodges and with Nico, we'll go ahead and do Gold Cup version of red light, yellow light, green light when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. And we can go in any direction you wish. We can go from red light to green light, or we can go from green light to red light. However, if you're an optimist or a pessimist, depending on how you want to.
Let's start negative and go positive.
All right. So then, who's your red light so far out of the Gold Cup?
Aidan Morris, Alan Senora, Aaron Long. Aaron Long's been a red light for a while, though. And yeah, I think those are the 3 right now.
Okay.
And I hate to say that about Morris, but, like, bro, you haven't looked good against not good teams. And again, it's he and Senora have had similar showings where it's like, you haven't been bad, but you haven't been good against bad teams.
Yeah.
So you haven't done anything to justify any more inclusion.
Okay. And there are no numerical limitations to the number of folks that you can have in these categories. Obviously, that was just off the top of your head. Now, yellow light can can trend in either direction. The yellow lights can trend either from green toward red, or they can trend from red toward green. Yeah. So what's your yellow lights here?
So my yellow light, I have 3 as well. This is just the best way for me to think about it.
Yeah.
I think one yellow light is Alejandro Zendejas. I think we need to cool off on the hype. He may fall into the Areola Morris type of category where it's like he's just the extra winger because he's there. Eventually you do have to fill the roster with people to play.
But it's all about the recruiting, Paul.
And that's fine. And I think, I think I am more willing to bet on Zendejas being good than he would be bad. But, like, Paul Areola and Jordan Morris have scored goals. So maybe Zendejas, and granted, Zendejas last night was unlucky to not score. I think he had several shots blocked. He had a couple just missed wide. So I'm hopeful it'll come. I just think we need to cool off on Zendejas. My yellow light is James Sands as well, and that's in a positive direction. I think I'm more curious to see him play that 6th position against better teams because I thought he was very good last night from a possession standpoint. And if he can provide us more in possession than he has in the past, I think that would be a very good positive for the U.S. Again, we're still trying to figure out who that backup 6 is, and I know in the Nations League we found out maybe it's Yunus Musa, but having an actual backup 6 on a roster is probably a good thing. And so I'd like to see more of Sands, but I'm not like ready to fully go in on him. And the last one is Sean Johnson, and this is gonna sound negative because he had a great match yesterday by all metrics of a goalkeeper. He didn't give up a goal. He didn't even have to save a shot.
Yeah.
As someone who is the literal same age as Sean Johnson, I don't think we need to invest more time in him being a national team player when we could give those minutes to a guy like Gaga Slonina. And again, I don't think Gaga would have necessarily gotten anything out of last night outside of just playing in an official CONCACAF competition. And that is pretty valuable. It's more valuable, I think, to give him that and a not meaningless match, but a match that we can feel very confident with, as opposed to Sean Johnson. That doesn't mean Sean shouldn't be on rosters. Like, I think his inclusion for the World Cup was perfectly great because as your third choice goalkeeper, you want a guy who's a veteran presence, who does his job well, and clearly is a good locker room guy. I just don't think we need to invest actual playing time into Sean Johnson anymore.
Then that sounds like a yellow light for the lineup card and who was filling out the lineup card.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think the problem is BJ isn't probably focused too much on the future, right? He's focused on winning the games that he's playing. I think that's a little short-sighted from BJ, especially because it's very likely he'll continue to be on Verhalter's staff, and he will be part of building the next, not generation necessarily, but the next group of players, as Verhalter likes to call them, for the 2026 World Cup. I think it's a little short-sighted to not try to include some younger players and get them experience, because I think it's unlikely Sean Johnson makes the 2026 roster for a number of reasons, and one of those being that he's 34 years old. My knee hurts from playing this past weekend, and it's still swollen. So I can't imagine actually being a professional athlete this age. That's just where I am with Sean. I have nothing negative to say about him as like a player or a person, but it's just when you evaluate usage of minutes, investment of time, I don't think he's worth the investment anymore.
At Soccer for US PODs, at Bartimus Prime 19, Bart Keeler hanging out with us after the U.S. knocks off St Kitts and Nevis 6-0 last night, and their next group game is on the weekend, and that means that Bart's going to have to be with us on Monday to kind of break things down all over.
I guess so.
Green light. Who are your green lights so far in Gold Cup?
Well, we just talked about him. I think Jesus Ferreira is a green light. He had a very good game against Jamaica, got the assist on the game time goal. He obviously gets his hat trick last night. Looked very good. Again, what's that ceiling? So the green light is, Jesus, you need to find a way to prove that you are above this level, because you've proven you are at this level. You've proven you're a CONCACAF champion, man. Like, you're at this level, you can do it. Can you go above and beyond? And to be even fair to that, you haven't really done it against the good teams in CONCACAF. So, as we progress through this tournament, can you show that you're able to be a starting striker for the U.S. national team? That's the key. A starting striker going forward. And I don't think he can. I'm not in the Alexi Lalas boat that he thinks he doesn't know that Ferreira is not as good as Balogun. I can tell you that Ferreira is not as good as Balogun because I've seen them both play soccer, and Balogun has more goals than Jesus Ferreira has scored in a season in a much better league.
Why should I sit there and say something that would cause folks to turn away from my TV product? You want to keep the suspense going.
Well, they've already turned away because of Landon Donovan's haircut. So that was another talk on Twitter. It was the man. It's time. Just But yeah, I think that's a green light as Ferreira, just in terms of like we need to see more. But a good thing. I think a green light was Georgi Mihailovic for sure. He looked decent when he came on against Jamaica, I thought, but looked even better as a starter. Obviously, again, St. Kitts, not a fantastic opponent, but I thought that was good. The other green light, I think, was Brian Reynolds. And when you compare Brian Reynolds' performance to DeAndre Yedlin's performance, DeAndre Yedlin was a black hole against Jamaica. He couldn't control a pass. He couldn't make a pass. He couldn't do anything right. Brian Reynolds showed that he is a level above, in my opinion, DeAndre Yedlin, because he did the simple thing of having a good first touch. And to me, that's a green light. So I want to see more Brian Reynolds. I think he is, in my opinion, the guy that I want to put more time and effort into during this tournament. And again, DeAndre Yedlin, is he really going to 2026 World Cup? Is he even going to the Copa America next summer? That's what we have to start thinking about. And I don't think Yedlin is going. I don't think Long is going. And I don't think Sean Johnson needs to be a part of it anymore. So it's time to really get out these, and I'm going to use a term that I know I don't love to use, but like we need to get out these MLS lifers or these MLS. If you're above the age of 27, right, and you have had your primary career has been MLS based, I don't think there's a spot for you anymore in this U.S. national team. Not obviously we have this Gold Cup, that's great, but none of those guys have shown anything better than any of the players that we saw at the Nations League ever in their career. And there are reasons for that, but we have to start finding the next generation of those types of guys, right? And that's why I think Zendejas deserves more time, because at the bare minimum, he can do what Jordan Morris. Hopefully, he can do what Jordan Morris has done throughout his career. He can do what Paul Ariel has done throughout his career. But he's younger, and that to me just means you have a slightly higher potential than what they've shown throughout their time.
Wrapping up Group A play versus TNT Sunday in Charlotte at 7:00. What do you?
7:30.
Oh, true. Broadcast starts at 7:00.
Yeah. U.S. Soccer has started listing the actual start times in their app. So thank you, U.S. Soccer. They even don't. Yeah, it's 7:30, which gives you more time to get down to Fido Midtown after the Atlanta United game, which starts at 4:27 or something like that.
4:25 ish.
Yeah. Look, I think the U.S. has the best chance to win the group. Obviously, Jamaica's going to have to put out. We have a 3-goal differential lead on Jamaica. Jamaica has also conceded 2 goals. So if you're the U.S. and you keep a clean sheet, I think you've won the group. The tiebreakers, though, to be fair, are points, goal differential, goals scored. So Jamaica at right now 5 goals scored, the U.S. at 7. If my math is mathing, you got to score goals against Trinidad. I don't think that'll be a problem, and you should win the group.
There you go. So you've given your plans. Are you going to be doing the doubleheader? Are you going from Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, I'll be at the Atlanta United game, and then Marta-ing up to Fido for that game.
Yes, safe Marta-ing as always.
Yeah.
So Bart, as always, I imagine, are you going to be doing a hot drop Soccer for US POD after this one, or are you going to wait till the end of the group stage?
We might not even talk about the group stage, John. Sorry. I have a episode to edit for. We talked about the U.S. Women's National Team roster. Then we want to talk about Greg Berhalter.
Yes.
And then maybe we'll talk about the Gold Cup.
There you go. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, have a good weekend, sir, and I will catch up with you. I'll probably end up seeing you at the big stadium before you go to the on Sunday. So just be safe and stay cool, and I mean that both literally and figuratively.
Cheers, y'all.
All right, Bartimus Prime 19.